Ready?
Ready.
Welcome back to the Aftermatch. Come for the rugby, stay for the Aftermatch with Kirsten Beav. You are subscribing and we're giving you bonus episodes like there's no tomorrow. So this is your official All Blacks review. Beav's takeaways from the first test of the year against France. Beav, this French B team, not quite 13 plus. The French B is not bad. You were convinced last week, 13 plus. Yep. The All Blacks will run amok in Dunedin.
Yeah, of course it was.
There'll be no rust.
No, well, as the week sort of progressed last week, there was always the thought that there might be a bit of rust. But no, I thought the French, amazing, gave a real fairly handy account of themselves. That first 20, they threw a fair bit at the All Blacks. Obviously, a few referees things went this way, went that way. But by and large, the French, I guess, newbies gave a hell of a show of each other.
They scored some wonderful tries as well.
Yeah.
They looked good in parts.
That first try, obviously, they set it up beautifully. And we always talk about, and probably people always wonder, why is 13 so hard to defend? It's because as a 13, you've got to defend conscious of what's on the outside that you and your winger are having to look after. And obviously, you've got to stick close and work with your 12. And that first try the French got was just a case of Proctor, who didn't make many mistakes all night. He was very sound, but he just got caught a touch tight to his mate there, Geordie Barrett, and at the same time, his marker, who had to be the 15, Theo, who showed plenty of talent throughout the night, got on the outside of him, and then once they got him behind, they played quick. They played up tempo. I think Fakul carried it on, who's obviously an experienced, great campaigner, and then the impressive number 8 jotted over, and all of a sudden everyone was thinking, what have we got on our hands here tonight?
Yeah, look, like this is going to be interesting here. The second 20 minutes of the first half, the All Blacks upped the tempo.
Yeah, and that's the key there. The All Blacks were great at upping the tempo. Any opportunity, whether it was quick throw-ins from long, clearing kicks from the French, whether it was on counter-attack, whether it was going quickly from that first ruck on counter-attack, which was a real shift from last year. I was really impressed with that. That's how they got the tempo, and all of a sudden you could see 32 minutes and 33 minutes, and the French props were having some imaginary injuries to try and slow things down.
Oh, come on. They needed a breather, Beav.
Oh, look, I know enough to know that if you need something to be slowed down, you get your props to do it, because traditionally they've got to stop the game for them. But it was great to see the All Blacks take that tempo. And then once they got inside the 22, there was mistakes on the edge of line breaks and what have you. But the great thing I thought, once the All Blacks got inside the 22, and something that Razor and the rest of the coach will be pretty happy about, is how clinical they were. They were very good at their carrying cleans, very dynamic. And when the backs pulled the trigger, and by saying pulled the trigger, I mean getting the ball off the forwards, out the back, and then having a crack. Because if you watch a lot of Super Rugby, and by and large a lot of teams, they'll just let the forwards go until it's time that they can't go anymore. Whereas the backs, with all that class and quality out there, they looked up, saw that they'd compressed the French defence enough to pull it out the back of those plays, and the handling of Barrett and Proctor and Geordie Barrett and the likes set up some beautifully finished tries.
Do you think the All Blacks were planning on playing that like that from the opening whistle, or did the injury to Sevu Reece and Damien McKenzie coming on change the way that they were playing like they would have done in the last 20, but they just went there early?
No, I don't think that would have changed the strategy at all. I just think in that first 20, all the talk about this not being the French top team or what have you, they would have still been internally saying, boys, regardless of who's playing, they're going to be coming at us in that first 20. And you can imagine if it was the All Blacks so-called B or C team, we would still expect that they would go out and fight fire with fire in the opening exchanges.
Second half, French scored 2 tries 9 minutes after half-time.
Yes, and that's when you start to get worried. That's when you start to think, hang on, is there a miracle happening here? Again, much like the All Blacks, those tries in the second half from the French were done so well constructed. Some of the forwards interchange, you don't often sort of associate that interchanging passing that we see so often in Super Rugby with some of the French boys, but some of the skill level, I think, from the French forwards, I think you saw a little play there that set them through for the try that they crashed over just underneath the goalpost, where they had their pod. Yeah, they're three guys, and then that pod through to another replacement forward, sort of 4 or 5 wider. And what that does is teams are so strong around the rucks. They got their 3 or 4 guys each side. They're all bringing line speed. And then there's always a little bit of a seam between those 3 or 4 defenders, and that's what the French got themselves into. I think someone went, I'm trying to remember, number 21, his name escapes me at the time for the French, just went straight through and got within 2 or 3 metres, and then the big French forwards took over. So, no, it was... well constructed. Again, they too, very good at pulling the ball out the back of when it was on. And a couple of times they got the All Blacks. The All Blacks got beaten there. I think it was for Valaire's try, who was outstanding all night. But they didn't all come together. 1 or 2 came in and tried to bring line speed, and then some guys sit back. And when you're defending close to your line, you just got to be all on the same page. And the French took advantage of that.
The French seemed to have the momentum early in the second half. And then your favourite player from the French, who you've mentioned about 5 times already, Villiers.
Villiers.
Apologies. I don't know if Beaver did 7 form French or not. But that winger and the yellow card almost seemed to be... It could have been the game changer because Will Jordan scores shortly after, and then it's disallowed. But you would have thought that's the moment.
Yeah, you would have thought that's the moment. Look, to be fair, I don't want to get too much into the refereeing side of things, but I thought that was a very
hard yellow card.
And considering Berry is a former player, he must have been looking at that going, right, I know my bosses have got to tell me he's got to go for this, but rugby common sense tells me that's not a deliberate knockdown. And that's where I felt Berry would have probably been pretty torn because he would have seen that live and gone, that's just a hand.
Then you've got to make that call and just say it's not a yellow card,
The hand was down by his hip. It's not like he was doing the big intentional swat. And so it was a rough call, but in the end, they survived that.
They survived. 1 point ball game.
1 point ball game.
What is it about the French in these 1 point games?
Oh, they just wouldn't go away.
They would not go away.
Yeah, and you've got to commend, like I thought their 10 was first time I'd seen him. Sigons. I'll get to the bottom of it.
In the next 2 weeks.
But I thought he was outstanding, and for what they wanted and needed, obviously great off the tee. Wasn't it good how they could just alternate their goal kickers?
Yeah, between the 9 and the 10. The 9 took how many kicks?
They said one was a long range and one was not. Well, one was from halfway, and then the next one was from about 40 out on the angle. So I thought that's pretty similar distance.
Halfback was brilliant.
He was brilliant too. But Sigons, I just thought like his out of hand kicking. They were about territory and field position, not giving the All Blacks anything cheap. He controlled things very well, I thought. Obviously, he had a long career in top 14 by the sounds of it. But no, the French gave plenty. But, I think the All Blacks, they created a lot. And look, the scoreline, and people will go away and say, "Oh, look, the All Blacks 4 points victory against."
They had 3 disallowed tries.
3 disallowed tries against a so-called whatever French team. But for a first test, there was a lot to be happy about. You talk about the 3 disallowed tries. It's on another day. I still think that Proctor try gets given.
That was definitely a knock on. He lost the ball.
I don't know.
He lost it. This isn't rugby league.
It gets given a lot, that try. But I enjoyed a lot of the All Blacks work. You talk about the up-tempo, and they had a real crack, which I think for anyone who watched them a lot last year, probably you couldn't accuse them of that. But I thought they had a real crack last night. And, I'm just excited about where it goes to. The French, they're going to provide wonderful opposition in this series. But when you think about guys like Cody Taylor, I thought was, again, great. Cam Roigard probably, obviously last year was so disjointed for him. He was outstanding. And then you go through others, Geordie Barrett, Will Jordan, of course. So really, I think for a first test, the All Blacks can be pretty happy with that.
Your rating of the first test then, 1 to 10?
From an All Blacks point of view?
Yeah.
I think they would take a...
What did you rate them?
I'd say a 6.5.
Okay. That's fine.
It's a pass?
Yeah, it's a pass.
Yeah.
Above middle of the road and room to improve considering they've got 12 more tests this year.
12, 13?
12 to get to, 12 more to get to world number 1.
Of course, our bankers.
That's our mission.
Geez, I must admit, I was sitting there watching last night with a 1 point lead going, geez, that banking call was...
But early.
No, kept the faith in the boys, but no, wonderful performance, I thought, all things considering.
Just quickly, one other thing, the TMO.
Yes.
Too much intervention, just right. How did you see it last night? Because people are blowing up about the TMO, not just from that All Blacks match, but the intervention in the Lions match against the Waratahs as well.
They're heavily involved
They're involved a lot.
They're involved. They've got, if they're going to be involved, I don't mind. Like, there's a few incidents last night where he said to Berry, hey, there was a knock on 2 phases ago. Bang, go get it.
Not the ones that take 10 minutes to review.
No. You've got the technology. You're sitting up there. If you're going to help referee it. Don't then referee by committee. And by that, I'm saying chuck it up on the big screen for Nick Berry to approve what you've seen on all your technology. Keep it going.
Yeah.
The one thing, I know people are talking about the tries and what have you. I mean, by the letter of the law, what Tossie did, it is. You can't stand there and I think it was Goldie or Marsh who was talking about the technicalities of defending in that area.
Yeah, so was that correct?
Yeah,
the
was.
obstruction?
Yeah.
So, that defender would never have got...
He would never have got
No.
there. However, his movement compromised the guy outside him.
Right.
So he had to check in. And the reality is, in those situations, some of the very good teams, defending on their situations, they're trying to get that guy to defend 2 people. He checks the front runner. If the front runner's not getting it, he breaks off and gets the back runner. And so he was impeded to be able to do that. So I understood that. The thing that scares me, and I've seen it in the Lions tour and I've seen it again now here, is I thought it was outlawed. Maybe it was only Super Rugby, but the insect, the centipede or caterpillar or whatever they called it, is allowed to happen again.
Yeah.
And so you're getting guys piling up on top of each other at the back of rucks to give their halfback another 2 or 3 metres to mean there's no pressure on his box kick, but also what it does mean is it slows the balls down. You got halfbacks playing pitter-patter with each other for about 2 or 3 seconds. Well, we're in the entertainment business. Box kick from there now. Do it. Don't have 10 minutes to get organised.
And get Rico Ioane involved.
Yeah, because does that mean? No, but what does that mean? Poor box kick down to Rico.
Yeah.
You know, like at the moment, if you allow a halfback of international standard to have 10 minutes set up, have this centipede thing happening, he's going to put a great box kick up because he's under no pressure. Have pressure on him, so therefore the great wingers of the world get time.
Okay, well, that is Beav's takeaways.
Yes.
That is your bonus episode of the Aftermatch, officially reviewing the first test of the year. But look, tick, we banked that one. It may have been closer than we thought, but it has been banked. We'll be back for our regular podcast in a couple of days' time where we're going to push forward. Beav will name his team to take on the French in the second test and so much more.